right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone that's following us over the internet. Thank you for joining us and everyone that's present here today. So this morning we're going to have a lecture by Thiago presenting to us today. The topic on Blessed are the Afflicted. And, this is obviously a very important time for us. The summer is ending, the fall is starting, there's a transition happening around us. So perfect time for us to take these new opportunities of learning, incorporate some of it in our hearts, right? And this is why we're here today, this morning. So as we do every Sunday, before we start the lecture, we're going to read a small passage, and then from the book Happy Life, we're going to have our initial prayer, and then Travis is going to take over to guide us through that topic. So I'm going to invite Daniel to do the lecture, the reading for us. Not the lecture, yes. Not yet.
Oh. This right?
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
In all circumstances, be yourself. Do not try to appear better than you are, or underestimate yourself. Do not appear to be what you are not, as you yearn for a better position. Work hard to achieve it. When you discover imperfections, strive to improve yourself. Both the person who exhibits abilities that he does not possess, and the person who hides those that he does possess are lying. Being genuine, is that right? Being genuine is the way to acquire dignity. Going up is slow for everyone. The person who is winning the battle now began early. The person who is struggling now will win his battle later. Do not be embarrassed by the fact that you are a spirit on probation. In their time, your friends of today walked the road and you are now on.
So let us all this moment close our eyes, elevate our thoughts to our Father, Mother, God, our Creator. Thinking about our Master Jesus that came to this planet to guide us, to teach us to love, the law of love. All our spiritual friends that are present here today, and all of us that came in here today. So we all say thank you. Thank you to God for this opportunity that we have every single day and all the time in our lives. And may we take this opportunity that we're here today to improve, to learn, to grow spiritually, to change those old thoughts into good ones, good actions. May we continue this transformation inside and outside the entire world together. And we ask the blessings for Thiago to deliver this message to us and for all of us so we can receive the best that we deserve every single time. Thank you, God, and so be it.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I was almost relieved that Daniel was going to give the lecture today. Well, okay, here I am. Very good to be here with all of you today. And especially because when we get in touch with the lessons from Spiritism, which are basically getting in touch with the lessons that Jesus gave to us, it is always very humbling. And I like the little message this morning because it talks about humbleness, right? Not being more, not be less, than who we are. And thinking about who we are as people and as spirits in evolution, it is inevitable that in some point or many points in our lives, we will talk about pain and suffering. We will talk about struggle. We will talk about challenges, afflictions. When we first arrive here on this earth, there is pain. We hear the cry. We sometimes witness and some experience the challenges, the struggles, and the effort to bring somebody to the world. That is affliction. The last sensations that many of us will experience in this life may also accompany the afflictions. Departing from this earth is also a challenge. We are peeling off lots of layers of ourselves that we have carried with us. And also, when we turn a page in our existence, it could be a change of a job, it could be a change of country, culture, a change in our own physical abilities. There is also a certain level of affliction that comes with it. As if every time there is a certain, I call spice to experiences that we go through in our lives. And one of those spices is affliction. If we look at the psychology of pain and suffering and sadness, we know that all of us are born with the ability to feel sad. So there is a reason why being sad, being afflicted, going through those challenges and feel them is important. Nobody wants to be sad, but we are. Nobody wants to feel the afflictions, but we do. It is okay that we don't want, but at the same time, there is a value and there is a reason. And if we go beyond the psychology, looking at ourselves as spirits in evolution, also there is a meaning and there is a reason why we face afflictions, why we suffer. And that's why we're going to try to reflect together today. Please, Patrick. Oh, sorry. Thank you. So when we think about spiritism, we think about the lessons from the gospel, and we understand as well that the gospel is a very vast repository of wisdom for us. And it doesn't start in the New Testament. Actually, the messages have their seeds planted in the very beginning. Not pun intended, but from the very beginning, Genesis, there are lessons for us to take. And looking at those lessons, I came across one specific, very important passage from the book of Genesis that is called fall. And it was very significant because when we think about fall, we think about failure. We think about all the feelings and emotions that come from failing, from falling, both physically and existentially. So when in Genesis, there is the development of what I call the human nature. When God creates all of us and then gives us a place for our existence, a place to live and a place to learn. From the very beginning, humans were not left alone in peace. Right after there was Adam and Eve, who was there? The serpent. We could not be left alone for too long. There was a serpent there to start teasing them, to start inciting them. So let's try to extract something important from that. Let's remember, this is full of symbology. And it is important for us when we read, when we study, when we reflect upon those lessons, we extract an essence that is important, that there is a lot of symbology. It may be a lot of representation and association with ourselves. When we look at Adam, when we look at Eve, when we look at a serpent, when we look at a tree and the fruit, we're not looking at characters necessarily, but every one of those characters in the story, they have characteristics, they have qualities, they have imperfections, they go through experiences that then represent our own existence as humans. So let's try to keep that in mind and transcend the letters a little bit and try to extract that essence. In the book of Genesis, the chapter 3, there was the serpent. It was more crafty than any other beast on this earth, he says. And then the serpent comes to Eve. Here in the passage, many times it says it came to the woman. But again, we're not talking about gender necessarily. We're talking about aspects of us as human nature. So let's think about Eve as an archetype. And the serpent comes to Eve and says, you know, we may eat of the fruit of the tree. Even though God said no probably because it is very good. You know, we all learn everything that is prohibited probably is very good. And God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the garden. You shall not touch it, lest you die. All of that is very symbolic. But the serpent said, no, you're not going to die. Don't worry. I know better. I know better. The serpent then, tells Eve to eat it. And Eve eats the fruit of the garden. And then Eve goes to Adam and tells Adam, eat the fruit of the garden. Adam, as a good husband, goes and eats the fruit of the garden. And they had their desire and their impulse and their instinct to know. Because God said, the fruit of the garden will give you the knowledge of good and evil. And you will be like me. And there Adam and Eve eat the fruit. And suddenly they change after eating the fruit, which means knowing about good and evil, they change. And they become what is called ashamed. They become ashamed. And according to the scriptures, they cover themselves. They become ashamed because they start getting to know certain things. But that is interesting because if we are looking at ourselves as spirits, are there reasons for us to be ashamed? Are there reasons for us to hide anything? But as material beings, what happens with us? We cover ourselves, right? We have all those feelings and impressions and sensations about ourselves that many times make us feel embarrassed, ashamed, There are things about us that we don't like to know. And that starts happening to Adam and to Eve. And that's what is represented by when Adam and Eve say, we found ourselves naked, so then we hid ourselves. When we think about naked, it's not about naked from the material point of view. About naked means that when we can see through ourselves, we can see all of that is good and all of that is bad, all of that we like and what we don't like, and especially about things that we don't like. It makes us suffer. And that's why we hurt. If we look at the symbology of those characters, we can look at Adam, which is the meaning of those words. Adam means son of the red earth, being created from the earth. Wow, our bodies were created from the matter, from the earth. Eve means the mother of all living. It's not a coincidence that the mother of all living, Eve, is represented by a woman, the mother of all living. The tree represents then the spiritual life. And the knowledge that we have in the spiritual life, which means when we go to the spiritual life, the spirits tell us we become naked. Nothing is hidden. On this earth, we can hide many of our imperfections, tendencies, impulses, our history, things that we have done that we're not proud of, that we don't tell anybody. When we get to the spiritual world, there is no more chance to hide any of that. That's why eating from the fruit of the tree gives you all the knowledge of good and bad. Then we have the fruit, right? Eating the fruit gives the knowledge of good and evil, which means gives us the knowledge of the material objects of human desire. When we are exposed to the material life and everything that comes with it, we are faced with the challenges of understanding what is good and what is bad for us here. We are exposed to absolutely everything. And then we need to make choices. We need to make decisions, and we need to know about those things. What is good and what is bad for us? Who is good and who is bad for us? But also represents those human desires that we all have. Everything that is shiny catches our eyes. Everything that, gives us that opportunity to feel good. We have that tendency to go towards it. And the serpent. The serpent represents all of those tendencies that we all have of living by our own rules. The serpent says, I know better. God says, don't. The serpent says, I will do. If we look at those specific characteristics as characteristics that belong to us, every time that we revolt against what we can and we cannot, should not, what is permitted and what is convenient and what is beneficial. It is our human pride. That is the sin. God gives us the free will. God warns us through his laws, right? But God gives us as well the warning. What are the consequences of our actions? And here we are. And here we are faced with the consequences, our free will. And thinking about the meaning of our lecture today, if we talk about afflictions, we necessarily must think about our free will. We are free to make decisions, we are free to choose, but we carry the consequences of every one of our actions. And again, thinking about our human nature as imperfect beings, we think about acting with pride, feeling guilty. We think about the justice that comes over us based on a law, which is cause and effect. And we think about many of the tribulations that we may face because of the use that we make of our free will. So God tells the serpent then, right? On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life, so on and so forth. The serpent represents for us our confrontational side, aspects of our human nature, of our imperfect human nature. We are our own enemy. Our negative, imperfect, primitive nature is the worst enemy of our evolution. And that is the cause of many our own tribulations and afflictions and suffering. Here it is represented by the desire of humans to be like God, to make their own rules, to live by their own rules, to pay attention on their own needs above anybody else's. So when we think about the serpent and all that inciting and all the temptations, we are thinking about actually ourselves. It's not an external force that is forcing us to anything. It is our own tendencies that lead us to make decisions that will definitely lead us to suffer. And if we look at Eve as other aspects of our own existence as humans, it is interesting. God says, right, to Eve, you will multiply your pain in childbirth. That is exactly the passage on Genesis. You will multiply your pain through childbirth. In pain you shall bring forth children. And more, it says your desire will be contrary to Adam's, which means God is again telling us you will experience tribulation. You will experience material, physical, existential pain. Because Eve is one specific aspect of all of us, which is that aspect that is called the risk-taking that we have. But risk-taking, not in the sense of, taking risks that we hear on the motivational speakers telling us that we need to take risks in life. We are talking about the risk-taking that is that ambition of being more than we are, of being better than we are, of acquiring, having more than what we can even handle. It is part of our human nature, of that search for material desires, what we call our primitive impulses that bring us closer to the other species, than the human species, that in many ways we're not that far from. So the serpent that then, crawls in the ground, and the pain of experiencing that, being closer to the earth and to the ground. For Eve, it is the pain that represents many of the important roles that we occupy in our lives. And to Adam, finally, he was said, you have eaten of the tree, you shall not eat of it unless you plant and you harvest and you sweat and you get tired of it. You will need to create your own means for survival. And that is the passage that says, from dust you have come, to dust you will return. In the very beginning, I said, from the very beginning of our existence, that is pain. To the very end of our existence, we may experience pain. God, through those symbolic punishments, is giving us the dimension of the material life. Those characters represent our imperfect human nature and the inevitability to go through pain, suffering, and affliction in every single one of the things that we do here. We don't need to go far. If we thinking about Tony here, like when we're doing our exercises, striving to be better on our trades, on our, callings, our professions, our aspirations, we go through sacrifice. We go through pain many times, physical pain even. When we think about martial arts, it's a good representation, symbolic of all those overcoming those obstacles of pain and suffering, overcoming ourselves, our own limitations. And it's a challenge, isn't it? It is very challenging. As if we are sometimes combating our own nature. Every time that we are combating our own nature, we need to go through transformation and to change. And necessarily we will involve certain level of pain, discomfort, challenge, the desire to give up, the pain of not being as good as we wish we were. We constantly are experiencing those feelings, sensations, experiences. There is a meaning. There must be a meaning why we all experience certain levels of pain, discomfort, suffering, affliction, sadness, isn't it? If we stop there, it feels so much. If we don't find a meaning for that, that's how many people enter into despair, into hopelessness, into extreme sadness, and we don't feel there is a way out. But in the same way that we are exposed to it in reality, and also through those lessons, we are also exposed to there is a meaning for that. And when we start understanding the meaning of all those afflictions, and not only as people here living in this material life, but as the spirits, immortal spirits in a process of constant evolution, we can put those experiences in perspective. They have a place in our existences. And they are very important because they are teaching us something incredibly important for us. And they are needed for us to continue growing and evolving as spirits. So let's try to change a little bit the atmosphere and move from that very dense and heavy aspect that sometimes pain and suffering gives to us, and try to make sense of it, and trying to look at it from a different perspective that can give us, first of all, meaning, and also can help us to take care of it. Because as much as we inevitably go through pain and suffering, our lives are meant to be more than that. Much, much more than that. Oh, just for us to summarize that specific part. Every time that we think about suffering, it is important that we remember that our imperfect, in evolution, spiritual nature lead us to feel pride, to feel selfishness, to deny the divine laws, to confront sometimes God's will for us and God's determinations. Sometimes we act lacking morality, and remember, morality is the distinction, the action of good or bad. So we act in a way that is not good for us and that is not good for others. And many times, because of the conditions that the material life gives to us, we have an illusion, the illusion of a lack of consequence. The movies always tell us, right? There is no perfect crime. And actually, there is no action without consequence in our spiritual life as well. The reality is, we are given the material life and all the tribulations and all the pain and suffering that come with the material life in order to go through those tribulations, either a result of our own actions or result of our own condition as imperfect, to learn, to grow, and to perfect ourselves, and to transcend those aspects of pain and suffering, to enlighten ourselves and to become better every day. Then we make that move from the very dense and heavy and negative aspect of pain and that endless aspect of pain to something so counterintuitive. Let's then transport ourselves from the farmers 2,000 years ago. We move a few thousand years ahead, and we have with us Jesus of Nazareth, who starts talking to the people, to those farmers, to those fishermen, to those rural people, to people who only knew about their own lives, their own work, herding cattle, being shepherds of sheep and catching fish in the river, and come to them suffering, many of them enslaved, a region occupied by an empire, the Roman Empire. And Jesus comes to them and say, hey, you are very fortunate. You are blessed. You are fortunate that you are experiencing those tribulations today. And that is the change from that inevitable, dense, heavy pain that many times will have almost no meaning, because it will be simply, that is our human nature. We are fated to that. To something very important that Jesus gives to all of us. Hope. You are fortunate that you are going through those tribulations, because those tribulations are going to lead you to spiritual happiness. when Jesus sits with everybody on that mount, and Jesus tells everybody, you are fortunate to be poor. You are fortunate to be simple. You are fortunate even if you don't have any education. You are fortunate because you're being persecuted. You are fortunate even when you cry, even when you suffer, because there is something beyond that suffering. Yours is the kingdom of heaven. Remember, you need to translate all of that, right? There is something beyond this suffering. The suffering is not the end. The suffering is not the only thing that happens. Today you are experiencing that. But when we find the meaning and we transcend that pain and we work towards alleviating that pain on ourselves and on others as well, we will have the opportunity to go beyond and to understand that the pain was needed for us as stepping stones for our future happiness. Of course, you can ask me, that's okay, Jesus said that, but how do we know that there is going to be something better after that? Right now, the pain that I'm suffering has no end. I don't see an end to it. The experiences that I'm going through are very difficult, or I'm going through those experiences for a very long time. Is there going to be an end? Jesus talks about a kingdom. Jesus talks about a heaven. Is this going to happen only after I die? Is going to happen only when everything is over? That's a very good question. Thank you for asking that. Because when we look at those experiences, they will not make sense when we limit our view to that existence that we have today. Remember, it is important when we look at those experiences and those lessons that we listen to them with the ears of the Spirit. Are we only that existence? No. Were we created in the time that we were born on this earth? No. We are spirits that were created so long ago that we're not even allowed to know. This is not our first existence. Those are not our first relationships. This is not the first group that we sit to learn about that, probably. And we will still continue living after that material existence. And there will be other existences ahead of us that are going to be as much as we program them by the actions, the thoughts, the relationships that we plant today. Therefore, there are many of the experiences that we go through today that maybe had a cause in another time in our lives. Yes. That means that probably in the past, certain of those experiences, relationships, tendencies, decisions that we made were contributing factors to the tribulations that we're going through today. Yes. Yes. So let's see what Spiritism will teach us about it. And trying to learn from those lessons, to try to bring meaning for many of the experiences that we all go through in our lives. Here's the passage that we just spoke. It is in the book of Matthew, and it is part of what we call the Beatitudes or the Sermon on the Mount. And In the Gospel according to Spiritism, Allan Kardec would say, you should consider yourselves fortunate to suffer because your pains in this world are the debt of our past wrongs. Remember, we are here communicating to our spirits. We are probably living our best existence today. Chances are that our previous experiences were way, way more complicated than today. And if we are imperfect and make bad decisions today, imagine how many other bad decisions we may have done or have made in previous existences when we didn't have the knowledge that we have today, when we didn't have the means to understand that we had, probably when we had no idea that we were immortal spirits, when we may have gone through existence after existence without that understanding and that awareness of our real nature of spirits. Allan Kardec will continue saying, and this pain is if borne patiently while you are on earth, will save you from centuries of suffering in the future life. Hence, you should be happy because God has reduced your debt by permitting you to repay it now, which will guarantee the tranquility in the future. I don't think there is anything clearer than what Allan Kardec brought to us, saying, understand, we have gone through a lot of troubles because for a long time we are acting against God's law. We are acting with pride and with selfishness, trying to make up our own rules, forgetting about others. And today we are having the opportunity, going through those tribulations, to open our eyes for what this can cause. Therefore, waiting and going through those experiences patiently, taking lessons from them instead of revolting ourselves against it. So then we can find that what is the happiness in the future life, which means getting rid of that imbalance that we created for ourselves against God's laws. It is an imbalance that we all create. Every time that we go astray from God's laws, that is an alarm for us. That is a warning for us. And many times this alarm and those warnings, they come in the form of pain and suffering and affliction. In our material lives, we need usually, because of our own nature, we need very clear messages. That's why even though with those ambulances and fire trucks that are so loud and so bright and some people don't even see it. Imagine us from the spiritual perspective that sometimes we receive subtle, gentle warnings that we are going astray from God's laws, and sometimes we don't realize it. So God gives us an alarm system, a warning system, a wake-up call that many times touches our physical body. Again, we are all born with the ability to feel pain and suffering. Did you ever put a hand in the stove that was hot? That is pain. And what does it do with us? It saves us. It saves us. So when we think about transcending that physical pain to the existential pain, it is because there is a warning for us. That it is important to look back to ourselves. What are we doing? How are we living? How are we treating ourselves? How are we treating others? Not only that, remember, because of our, human nature, pain comes from losses. When we lose a job, when we lose a house, when we lose somebody that we love. What does that mean? It also teaches us the value that they have. But again, remember, as spirits, we know this is not the end. And maybe we don't know today. But if everything has a meaning, likely means that that distance, that temporary distance, is also very important to us. Can you believe if we had some of our relatives, tutors, teachers forever? Would we grow? Probably it would be very, very difficult. Imagine that some of those experiences are not only about punishment, they're also about teaching us how to become better selves. And that's where we are going now. That there are different ways that we experience that pain, and there are some different reasons why. Allan Kardec will tell us that pain is the goad that drives humans forward in the path of progress. Of course, that is important for us to understand what this little word is. I didn't understand, and it made no sense for me. And then suddenly I realized the gold, it's like the symbology of those lessons are incredible. The gold is a spiked stick. For those who know about herding animals, it is that kind of stick that has spikes to make the animals move. Remember, here it is very symbolic, because Allan Kardec understood that even that the people back then were knowledgeable of this. Like, we need to use those kind of symbologies like that. So pain is that goal. Pain is that spiked stick that moves us forward to the path of progress. Only the Spiritism will help us understand why we are blessed for suffering. Why are we blessed for suffering? First of all, Spiritism will tell us there is a justice in the afflictions that we go through. The justice means through successive incarnations, we have different opportunities, experiences to spiritualize and to grow and to enlighten ourselves, to progress. Some of those experiences are absolutely necessary for us. In the same way that being incarnated is not a punishment, but it is a great lesson. Being incarnated brings pain, discomfort, change. Our bodies decay. Our bodies are made to change. They have a function for us. And then one day we will need to say goodbye. And in this process, there is a lot of little pains and discomforts and twists and breaks and sprains and strains, whatever you want to call. But what does that mean? That means that they help us to put this material life in perspective. This material life is finite. That helps us to move forward and to aspire for better conditions of life. For instance, to continue evolving as spirits. Also, we suffer differently depending the nature of this suffering and the reason why those experiences come to us. And more than anything else, how we go through the experiences matter. It is the good suffering versus the bad suffering. So basically, if we look at the present causes of afflictions, we all know, right? Our lack of discipline, our pride, our ambitions, our vanity, our selfishness, all our types of excesses that we go through. Each one of us will probably, if there was a line underneath each one of those little examples here, we all could populate them. So then let's do this by ourselves. We don't need to show anybody. All of us know our source of pride. All of us know our tendency for excesses of which kind. So we suffer today because we don't treat ourselves that well today, in many ways. But when we investigate and we understand that some of the reasons why I'm suffering, I cannot find them now. So chances are that they come from the past. Which past? Remember, past experiences as spirits incarnated in previous incarnations, right? Mistakes that were made, excesses that were made, decisions that were made in previous existences. Imagine that in the 21st century, we still hurt others. We still hurt ourselves, let alone when we were less evolved. Probably we hurt others more. We hurt ourselves more. Imagine the knowledge that we have today, and it's still very difficult for us to take care of ourselves. I usually say, out of disclosure, I usually say, not because I'm, any example for anybody, but more or less 10 years ago, I came to TSS. So TSS was celebrating 3 years. And one of the first lectures was from Marco, by the way. And we were talking about the sickness of today is the healing from the mistakes that we made yesterday. So we were talking about, he was talking about even, some physical, illness that we are born with, some problems that are chronic that we experience. We're talking about, mental health issues, physical issues, people who, spend their whole lives with asthma, with, emphysemas, or with problems with mobility. And back then, I made a decision, and I said, I think I need to stop smoking. Again, I'm imperfect, like. And 10 years ago, it was a very difficult decision because, again, I understood that my tendencies were such that it took me years to try. And then because of the lecture, which probably came in the right time, in the right moment, in the 21st century, in, 2014, after existences and existences and existences, and then suddenly I stopped smoking. Which probably something that, those kind of, habits that we develop, they're not developed only here. Many of them that we carry for a long time, they are difficult. So we're looking at a lot of experiences and habits that we develop throughout, imagine, existences. We're not talking about years. We're talking about existences. We need to be very true, very clear that when we think about spiritual evolution, we are talking about the work of centuries. Imagine that probably we may be dealing with problems for existences, and we may be consulting, the century doctors. Until one day we think, overnight I'm cured. But, let's take credit for ourselves. Probably we're doing that for centuries. And if we are fighting very difficult tendencies to get rid of, we need to be good with ourselves to understand that, there is a fight. Either there was a fight before us, there is a fight ahead of us. But that's why we have those challenges to overcome. And consequences of those past experiences will lead us to what we call the expiations, right? When we hear those words, Spiritism tells us that we're in this world of trials and experiences, right? So trials and expiations. So expiations are the consequence of our past mistakes that we are then experiencing today in the form of afflictions. Those are the expiations. Now we understand that we are blessed for having those experiences today, because today we are having that opportunity through those experiences to realign ourselves with God's law and with our own process of spiritual evolution. Right? As we spoke, all of us have our tribulations, our troubles, our challenges, today that we are carrying with us, our what we call our crosses that we need to carry, right? We suffer because of our free will. We suffer because we act, and some of those actions bring us natural consequences. Some of them are painful because those actions are contrary to our spiritual nature as a spirit in evolution to reach the relative perfection that we can reach. Right? For the wrongs that we all cause, for the wrongs that we helped, others to cause as well, and for what we still haven't done. We suffer as a consequence of our nature of imperfect spirits. The book Heaven and Hell tells us very clearly, we suffer because we're still not perfect. We suffer because we still have a way to go to become pure spiritually enough not to be affected by the pains and the tribulations of material life. Material life will necessarily bring us those experiences. And that's when it comes to a non-punishing kind of pain. It shows us, let's move forward. Let's put in perspective. Let's give the importance that we need to give, not more, not less. But let's move forward. It doesn't end. We don't need to go through that. We don't need to live like that forever. We are going to live even better than that. Right? Also, it is an education for the spirit. Clearly, when we see others suffer and we develop the empathy, we understand that hurting others is not good. That is a lesson. When we see the suffering that happens around us today, it is a lesson for us. Life is educating us that doing those things that are happening today that are hurting so many people, please let's not do them. Imagine if this was caused to us or to people even closer to us. That is an education for the spirit. Gives us self-awareness and knowledge about ourselves and who we are and what we do. It is a mechanism of alert and warning, as we said. And it is the way to help us to change the course of actions of our existence. That is what we call evolution. Right? And it is the realignment with ourselves, with God's laws, and reconnection with our purpose in the creation. We're almost there. Thank you for being patient here. Important to think about our attitude towards suffering then. What can we do about suffering, about our own suffering, about other people's suffering, right? What can we do about it? First of all, thinking about our own suffering, there is a word that is called resignation. And the other one is called acceptance. It means that certain of the challenges that we go through are inevitable for us to learn to move forward. Some of those experiences are necessary for us in this existence. So instead of revolting against them, revolting against others, trying to shorten those experiences drastically, it is important that we understand the meaning, that we are perseverant, and we continue fighting to make our lives better. But understanding that what cannot be changed today, we need to take care of it and carry with ourselves, knowing that this will change. Learning with those experiences and helping others. The spiritist literature, right, come after Allan Kardec, especially with the mediums that, gave us so many messages from the spiritual world. They all tell us that one of the greatest recipes against the pain, it is alleviating others' pain. Let's help others because others' pains is our pain. We're here together for very important reasons. We're here together because we need each other. We need to learn that because we are imperfect, we only together we can move forward. Alone, we are not able to move forward successfully. First of all, we are imperfect. Second, we are in a collective environment, in a social environment that needs, that collaboration with each other, understanding and listening. And also because we are being given the opportunity to collaborate with the creation. Therefore, collaborating with each other, we're collaborating with each other's incarnation. When somebody else goes through certain painful experiences, especially those close to us, chances are we are finally now helping those who we couldn't help in previous existences. So here we have another opportunity to help. And helping us, right, to not being indifferent to pain and suffering of any kind. From the book Ceifa de Luz is the Harvest of Light from Francisco Xavier, from the Spirit Emmanuel, is a little passage that also represents a lot of what we're saying, right? The sweat of work gives experience. The tears of affliction kindles the spiritual light. When pain visits you, reflect the message to it. There is no suffering without meaning. Were it not for the test, no one would be able to treasure understanding and discernment. And we will leave you with this message that, remember, we don't need to go through this alone. Probably we cannot. But one thing that is very important, those lessons are not only about the meaning of painful experiences, but they're also about the meaning of helping each other through those inevitable challenges and trials and expiations that we go through in this existence today. We are here together, and Jesus taught us, because when we rely on his teachings, we see those messages being acted in reality. We can make those messages become a reality in our actions with others. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Thiago. Really, really interesting. And of course, it's always a moment for us to reflect on the challenges, right, that we live in these experiences. So it was very enlightening, and I think certainly made us all think about a lot of things we live every day, right, in our lives. So any questions here, comments, anything on the internet?
We have one
Yeah.
question from the internet.
Yeah.
Is how do we identify what challenges we have got from previous lives?
That's a very good question. When we look at Spiritism will tell us, when we look at ourselves and when we don't see the causes of our suffering today, chances are they will be from the past. But at the same time, Spiritism tells us something. The most important thing is, it is essential for us to deal with the experiences and challenges and tribulations that we are going through today. No matter if we cause them today or if we cause them in the past, the reality is our existences are chapters of our own one life. So from the past or from the present, this is still us. Sometimes trying to look back too much is even confusing for us. It may be even a little bit, like overwhelming. But the chances are, many times we go through chronic, physical illness. We go through, certain disappointments that come out of, nowhere sometimes. Relationships that have a twist and a change that made us feel connected in a way that many times we don't want to be, for a very long time. So we can have a bit of a glimpses that some of those experiences, they are not from today, but probably they are a result of this, need for realignment. But the most important thing is how we're going to then use the opportunity that we have today to realign ourselves. Therefore, if this has been caused in the past, we are having a great opportunity, a blessed and a fortunate opportunity to deal with them today. So let's focus our energy in dealing with them today. And maybe the future will tell us. We all know by the literature, sometimes we will only understand that a few existence from today. Right?
One little comment, like when we look at those kinds of tribulations, and maybe even help with this question, is like I find that we summarize that all in one word, it would be distractions. When we watch the distractions that drive us away for our goals, that kind of, that's what for me, for what I was getting from it, it brings the answer for my main cause of my tribulations are the distractions that I got do because of pride, because of self-image, because of anything. Not necessarily a bad thing like a vice, or can be even a passion, can be a good thing that take you away from what you should be focusing. And maybe if that distraction is so strong, that's what comes from all that life, right? Because why I'll be dragged for that.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Delay things, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any other comments, questions? No? So I'd like to thank you again, Thiago, for coming all the way down here to enlighten us with this very, very nice lecture. So as we all know, this is the moment that we're going to start to wind down our meeting and prepare ourselves for the passes that are going to come. And I would like to thank our friends from the internet that connected with us today. So the passes, we're going to have a short prayer. You may see that the lights are going to come down just to help us focus. And after the passes, we're going to have a fortified water in the back there if you guys